Hey kids, it's Jurassic James, and on this Jurassic James Explains, we're looking at arthropods. So arthropod means joint, foot. So think of arthritis in your people, well not probably kids, but adults, older adults get arthritis in their joints. So arthro means joint, pod like podiatrist, your foot doctor means foot. So basically when you say bugs, most people mean arthropods. So in general, I have them same rules apply. The older type into the younger type here. The first arthropods and the most interesting ones in the fossil record, I think, are trilobites. Now, trilobites show up in the Cambrian period over 500 million years ago, and they die out 250 million years ago, which is roughly 20 million years before dinosaurs. So the last trilobite died before the first dinosaur. Now, the word trilobite, people often think it means, well, the word trilobite means three-lobe rock because there's actually three sections. There's also three sections going this way too: the cephalon or head, thorax, and pygidium, which I call the trilobite. Oh, they move still now. So the idea is that with trilobites, that you don't see it in the fossil collecting world. This is one of the two most collected things. I mean, because they're like Pokemon. You want to get all of them. There's several thousand species. People collect them all the time. Every mineral show I've been to, there's a trilobite for sale somewhere. Some are more rare, so it costs more money. But in general, one thing to point out is that you have a nice cephalon. They do have antenna. We know that now. Some fossils don't show that. Many don't show that actually. And then of course there's the legs on the bottom. And there's different species of trilobites. I mentioned the Pokemon example, is that the idea is that there's different shapes and designs. They're all very similar, but still very different. And some species have spines on them. It's really cool. Again, Cambrian till Permian, and then they're extinct. Next we have a group called, big picture, Dinocarids. One of the popular members of this group is Upabinia. This guy, I call him the five-eyed monster. Not a science word, it's just what I call him personally, because it has a little proboscis mouth, he's 5 eyes here. And again, this guy, we thought they initially were crawling in the Cambrian muds, but there are no crawl marks. We found trilobites walking, like footprints, trace fossils. We also found trilobites feeding. We can see these points where in the mud they're feeding, looking for something, and it matches their head shape. But with Upabinia, we don't see any kind of ground or substrate fossil remains. So it shows that they're swimming above the waterline with these weird little things. Now the word dinocarid means terrible shrimp, like dinosaur, terrible lizard. So it's kind of a funny thing. This guy's name, this is a big one. I got this at Black Hills Institute in South Dakota. I was digging with Pete Larson and his team, and I saw it in the gift shop, and I was like, I need to go home with that. This is Anomalocaris, and again, in the safari tube or Cambrian tube, you get one too. I'm going to use a bigger one to show you more features on it. So same thing as Upabinia, they have these little flappy bits here that move around. So they actually don't crawl in the mud. They actually kind of like do like this. And we know they're voracious predators. The name Anomalocaris means abnormal shrimp because they first found it. These little pieces right here were found separate because bugs are jointed. So they kind of fall apart in fossil record. So they thought it was their first shrimp. The mouth or little disc right there is thought to be a sea jelly or a jellyfish. So it was given its own name. And then one day they found the whole thing together and go, oh, it's all one animal. And it's like really big. It was like 3 feet long, which most of the stuff in the Cambrian is like this size, like between my fingers. And this guy's like huge. So this is the top predator in the environment. So it's worth noting. And this guy went extinct at the end of the Cambrian. Now, members of its group survived, I believe, until Silurian period, about 400 million years ago, roughly 400. But Anomalocaris itself was gone by in the Cambrian. Now, I mentioned earlier the term trilobite, and people go, why are they so popular? What's this big deal? Trilobites are successful, and there's a lot of them. And people go, oh, well, if they're so successful, why aren't they here today? Yeah, but that's like saying yeah, in that case, sponges are successful. Sea jellies are successful. But for bugs, they're everywhere, and they're in these rock layers. And you see there's other bugs or arthropods in the same rock in Cambrian that do not have 3 lobes. These guys here are other kind of arthropods that live in a Cambrian right beside trilobites, but they don't have 3 lobes, and they're just more trilobites. Success in evolution, generally speaking, is long-lived. Your type is around for a long time, and a lot of individuals. So if you look at any like before dinosaurs, Paleozoic rock, you see trilobites somewhere in the fossil record. You can actually watch each type as they change over time. So you'll see one in like Middle Cambrian and one in Late Cambrian, and they're different species, but they're still trilobites. So the idea is that as you go up in time, you can watch how they change. And before we can actually do chemical testing and realize that the rock layers are millions of years old, early paleontologists saw that the trilobites would change for different time periods or go away, and that's how they determine different time periods, because they're like, hey, there's one kind of life forms here, and then there's something else above that, therefore there's an extinction event. This is a different time, basically. Now, as far as, but on that same note, I would say Mariella is the most common arthropod in the Burgess Shale in Canada, where, the most famous Cambrian site in eastern Canada. And they're everywhere. So they're super abundant, but again, they didn't survive past the Cambrian. So you can be successful in your own time, or you can be successful over the long time, and Trilobites did that. The next group we have are called Chelocerata, and there's subgroups. First of all, we have those are horseshoe crabs. Horseshoe crabs fall in. They don't like being touched, apparently. Yes, if you ever see a real horseshoe crab, do not touch it. Just appreciate it from afar. So people often consider trilobites like these, and the idea is that they have very similar designs. But again, trilobites have the 3 defined lobes. They do not have that. They have this, the cephalon, this large headpiece here. This telson is not venomous. People think this can shoot venom into you. The purpose of this thing is to, when they flip over, they use it to flip back over. That's all it is, basically. Fun fact about these guys, they have copper in their blood, where we have iron, we humans. So we have red blood, they have blue blood. They're very, very royal. So these guys, I have a little gross series, little eggs and everything too. So horseshoe crabs that we can recognize are from the Triassic to today. So there are dinosaurs living near horseshoe crabs. We see them today. It doesn't mean the ones living today are the exact same species as back then. They just are the same grouping. It's kind of like how we are humans, Homo sapiens sapien, and there's like Lucy, and she's anthropomorphic. She looks like a humanoid, but she's not a human like us. So same thing here. Other members of the Chelocerata group, the arachnid branch, include spiders and scorpions, which are known for having 8 limbs, particularly the 8 legs, 4 on each side. They also have, scorpions have the pincers, and spiders have the pedipalps. And those are actually just modified legs in in a fun way. And they're, again, arachnids. So the other group at Chelocerata, or the Eurypterids, or sea scorpions. And they don't make a lot of models of these. These are actually like clear, like plastic models you can order and assemble. Not a lot of friendly toys of Eurypterids, unfortunately. But the idea is that these are often called sea scorpions because they look like scorpions. They're in the ocean. They like hypersaline, or really super salty water. Whatever they are found fossilized, we see them in salty water. And they show up in the Ordovician period, and they die out by the Permian. They're gone by the Permian, right? Spiders and scorpions both show up in the Silurian period, and they die. Well, they're here today, actually. They don't die out. So that's Chelocerata. In Crustacea, which is a more familiar group, we have what I consider seafood. Now, this guy here is the earliest Cambrian crustacean, and again, I had to order it, I think, from Japan. But basically, if you look at any Burgess Shale video swimming around, and this is like, in some ways, jokingly, it's like the grandfather of all shrimp kind of thing. So, but we don't really see crustaceans that we recognize, shrimp and lobsters and stuff, or at least crabs, until the Mesozoic. Because even though this guy's in the Cambrian, trilobites are everywhere. They're not dominant, like they're not like superior to everything else. They're just more of them. And it's not until the Permian extinction, well, Devonian first, then Permian extinction, where trilobites were really wiped out, that we see crustaceans really replace them in the oceans. So the first shrimp-like things were Mesozoic, think Triassic, Jurassic, basically. And crabs, there are early crabs in the Jurassic, but they don't look like crabs you recognize today. The look we know today show up in the Cretaceous period. So the idea is that, late Cretaceous actually, we have crabs we would recognize visually. And of course we have our little lobster here, like that. And the underappreciated, underknown isopod. And isopods are cool because every so often on different media outlets, they'll pull up an isopod from deep ocean, and someone will be like, giant ocean cockroach. And that's my blow-eyed talk, like, they're not cockroaches, they're not insects, they're crustaceans, I get really upset, obviously. Misinformation, it's a thing for me, given my life's work, So isopods are actually crustaceans, and this one's one of the giant ones you find at the ocean rift. So we thought initially in science that animals need the sun to live. All animals, plants, they had some kind of sun connection to the food web. And then they found these deep sea vents where these chemicals come out of the deep ocean, and these bugs and things are living there, worms are living there. So it's really kind of cool. It's believed that from crustaceans that we get insects. Now, Insecta is one of the largest groups of all. We all have interacted with an insect somewhere in our life. Some of the most obvious characters are, you can buy these in these general like tubes of bugs from teacher supply stores or like Michael's. But you have like bees, which are Cretaceous, butterflies, which are technically Eocene, but they're butterfly-like things in Cretaceous period. Mosquitoes, which of course are known for making Jurassic Park. Ladybugs, which are technically in the beetle family, which is a huge group of bugs. Then we have our crickets and our praying mantis, which are very known to be very devout. They are very religious. I'm kidding. The praying is because their arms like this. Cockroaches, which the earliest cockroach-like thing shows up in the Carboniferous period, if you can recognize, but it's thought today that they're different than modern roaches. They're different. No, obviously, it's like a Lucy human example. It's the thing that looks like it, but not quite the modern roach. And then we have our modern dragonflies, and I can't find a model of Meganeura, but the idea is that you always hear about a giant dragonfly in the Carboniferous period. Meganeura is not a dragonfly per se. It doesn't have all the criteria to make it a dragonfly under modern etymology, but looking at the plethora of bugs, it's closest to dragonflies. And it's kind of like how people consider like the great white shark, a megalodon, like a great white shark. It's like, yeah, they look very similar, we believe, but they're actually different things, different branches, you know, the same family, the different family. So insecta is very, very abundant. It's in your life, it's in your world. They're fleas, all these things, right? Ticks and mites are arachnids, but fleas are insects. And the last group I'm going to go over, which are actually thought to be the first animals on land, are Myriapodes, which are centipedes and millipedes. And centipedes, for example, do not have 100 feet, but they have more of a flat body and one leg on each side, each section, where millipedes have 2 legs on each section, and millipedes are usually more round. And in general, millipedes aren't predators. They're detrital feeders. They eat trash. And they actually, the 2 ways they can hurt you are, 1, if you touch them, some can secrete certain things that are toxic because they don't be eaten. And 2, they can tickle like the dickens. They crawl on you. I handled a giant African millipede at the museum, and it tickles because the little arms all touch you. It's really weird. Centipedes are the ones that you don't want to mess with because they are predators. They have pincers. They have venom. Their pincers are dirty. They bite other bugs. Then if they bite you, you get infections sometimes. So that's why they're so dangerous. If you see a centipede in the field, leave it alone. Go away. And for those of you who wonder why paleontologists and archaeologists, we tuck our pants into our boots, because if you don't do that and you're laying down on the ground and you're digging, that pen cuff next to your leg is a cave with shade, and a millipede will crawl in there looking for shade. And it's happened to a volunteer at the museum once, and it actually bit her in the leg, and it, according to her, it was worse than childbirth, or like childbirth. So yeah, like, don't bother centipedes, leave them alone. So in general, these are the arthropods, sorry. The trilobites, the other various other ones, the arachnids and Chelicerata, crustaceans, insecta, and myriapode. They're different kind of bugs. I know that most of you like dinosaur toys. That's why I do what I do. But if you ever want to, you be like more serious about your dinosaur collecting, you want to have the whole ecology, the entire environment. So you can see that dinosaurs are not just this island vacuum. They're living with other species, and they would interact with these things too. Hence the mosquitoes, and thank you for Jurassic Park. That being said, thank you guys. I'll see you next week with something cool called mollusca.